Hello humans, and welcome to Alien Robot Tiger, a podcast about you. There's a time-honored tradition of starting wars over torture.
Yes.
Hello humans. Welcome to Alien Robot Tiger, a podcast about you. I am Tiger, and I am joined by my friend Robot.
Hello.
And my friend Alien.
Greetings.
Today, we are talking about human governance. And I want to start this off the most broad, but also a question that I don't think gets asked much by humans. Why do humans govern each other?
As opposed to other beings, or just as a general question?
I think some of both. Yes, from a tiger perspective, we do very little bothering what other tigers are doing, much less what other non-tigers are doing, after, they are no longer kids. Humans do a great deal of bothering what other humans are doing, for better and for worse, I think.
Well, for me, it seems to make sense, or the way I make sense of it, not having a family, is it seems like it starts with their family units. Like you said, with kids, they take that family principle, and then it gets, like you said, they overdo stuff. And so it gets overdone. So they're like, we're a family. Here's some other people that I don't want to have to kill. So I know we'll pretend they're family. Or back in olden times, they would actually make sure they're family. They have clans, which is like you only can marry cousins to make sure we're all family so we don't kill each other, which didn't always work because they'd kill each other anyway. But I think of that as the primary thing that seems to separate them from most animals. Though animals, you can have the fish, those fish thingies that swim around. They have schools, they call them, or humans call them, or pods. And so they kind of have family units, and wolves have packs, and monkeys have packs, and birds go in flocks. So I guess there is some sort of larger family or group stuff that happens with other ones.
So the question is, why do humans govern each other?
Mm-hmm.
So something that does stand out to me is that humans are, out of all the species that sort of exist on Earth, on a spectrum of cooperative versus non-cooperative, they are very, very high up in the cooperative category. In fact, some people would argue that really the only similar creatures in terms of cooperative abilities to humans would be things like termites, mole rats, maybe ants. Given that highly cooperative nature, an argument that I would make is that the governance is sort of just a reflection of the way that they cooperate with each other.
Actually, I remember reading a thing about this Darwin guy. Maybe you've heard of him.
I think I have.
Yeah, he said survival of the fittest, I believe, was one of his concepts, and evolutionarily strong things are the ones that survive and reproduce and pass their genetic material on. However, one thing that I have heard about the main book where he mentions competition, he mentions cooperation, something like an order of magnitude times more, but that's not the part that sticks out to people.
It does. I guess the question, is that a reflection of their cooperative capabilities, or is the phenomena also influenced by other things? Because I fall more in the former category of that this thing we call governance is just a reflection of how they cooperate with each other. Ants and termites, somewhat equally cooperative, cooperate in very different ways than humans do. Ant hives tend to have a queen, and they have all these sort of drones that work almost like hive minds, and humans, despite the way that they act on the Twitter sometimes, are not hive minds. So the way they have to cooperate seems to be different, and I feel that governance is sort of a reflection of the way that they need to cooperate.
Also, fascinating concept, because humans travel all around, there's these two powerful, deadly species of ants. There's soldier ants and killer ants. I don't remember the exact ones, but there's actually a world war going on underneath people's feet, and there's these two types of ants that are fighting all over the world for dominance. Leads to something I was thinking about is violence. I think of basically the evolution of societies as being violence-based. Essentially there's monopolies of violence. Then once that gets sorted, there's monopolies in information. Once that's sorted, then there's people are cooler than others. They call it charisma.
Do you think it always happens in that order?
I don't. Well, I think if I have a secret and you can just threaten to stab me and take it from me, then I think you need the monopoly on violence to happen first.
I think that depends on how much the person with the knife wants the secret. Because if you stab someone, you didn't learn the secret, you just prevented them from knowing the secret.
What if you just stab them a little bit and say, I will stab you a little bit more, but give me the secret, or I will stab you a little bit more.
It's 50-50 odds on getting the actual secret or getting garbage that they just throw out, but...
Downside of torture. Notoriously unreliable. And yet, the United States starts wars over it sometimes, or because of information collected from torture. So, Tiger, essentially no governments amongst your people, aside from the basic, like, kit-raising pit?
There are analogies to be made between tiger cooperation and human cooperation, but I don't think the aggregation of tiger communities could be called governed in any meaningful way. We have violence, and we have secrets, and we have charisma. Our relationship to those things are different than humans seem to relate to them as. But all of those things are at play in all sorts of communities. But humans do this interesting thing where they start to stack them and take the secrets and the violence, and you separate a class of people who are allowed to know the secrets, use the violence, and keep those things away from other classes of people. And maybe that's not the only way to conceptualize governance. Well, maybe that's a good next question. Where do we draw the line around governance? Is it governance when you tell your child not to touch the hot stove, stick a fork in the outlet?
Yeah, so where do you draw the line on the difference between, how would I say it? Where does suggestion turn into command? Would you say that's the distinction between a governance and and just a standard relationship?
Yeah, when is it I am persuading you because of the eloquence of my words or my charisma or how much you like me or some benefit you think you can gain, and when am I saying do this or else? So it's the carrot and the stick sort of thing. Like those people with all the secrets and violence on the flip side also usually seem to have most of the stuff too. And humans have this incredible, almost unbelievable craving for stuff. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yes, George Carlin had a very good skit about humans and their stuff. If you ever have time, you should look it up on YouTube.
Okay. I think the stuff, like private property, the idea that some of these things constructed of atoms around me are somehow my possessions versus your possessions. So Tiger, this table belongs to me because I am making a claim right now to these atoms that compose this. Seems almost kind of nonsensical when you're looking at it from a non-human perspective.
Indeed.
And yet tigers kind of scent their territory, don't they? Aren't they kind of saying, like, this is mine?
The concept of property gets handled differently in different cultures as well. It's like violence. There's violence in tiger communities. There's something like property in tiger communities. But we don't relate to it in a legalistic way. Your property is rarely protected by someone else's ability to control violence.
Aside from your own.
Yes.
So you would say tiger communities don't really have the monopoly on violence down, or perhaps it just stops at the monopoly on violence?
I think there is a concerted effort among most communities, non-human, to avoid monopolies of power structures.
So power in those communities then tends to be very individualistic, as in it's not group orientated.
Look at a flock of geese. They have a community-oriented grouping of power, but a decentralized, individually oriented distribution of power.
Mm.
Or like deer, supposedly in deer, when they decide they're going to move somewhere, it isn't just like the alpha male, the stag, like strutting around and going, we're going here, bitches? Would they literally be bitches? Is that only dogs?
Depending on how
does.
poetic you would like to be a robot.
I
It
suppose.
doesn't have the same bite to it.
Yeah. So come along, does. Not quite the same ring, but
A different sort of connotation as well.
yes. But it seems, from what I understand about deer culture, is eventually they start signaling like, I'm done, I want to go this way, and they kind of start looking or pointing their ears that way. And then once a certain number, which the threshold is somewhat nebulous and kind of varies depending on the situation, once a certain threshold of them decide we're leaving, then they all start to leave. I don't know if that's true of other herd animals as well, like a herd of buffalo. I wonder if there's not like one buffalo that's like, listen up, everybody, time to go that way. It's just like some buffalo are like, well, we're going this way. And everyone else is like, oh, where's everybody going? I guess we're going this way. Which is, again, often like humans.
Yes, humans. I said that humans are not hive minds, but they're definitely herd minds. Probably a completely different conversation on itself, but an important thing we need to understand with humans is humans right now have this really weird idea in their head that when it comes to their cognition and their agency, they are lone individuals in an isolated world and don't seem to believe that something that I would call distributed cognition applies to them. They think they are entirely separated and individuated from each other in the way that the buffalo are not. But I've argued, no, if anything, they actually might be more interconnected than the buffalo are. And I feel any conversation about governance needs to take this into account, because humans do not seem to take that into account when they talk about their own systems of governance.
Yeah, I've actually heard tradition referred to as the human colossus, like the collective wisdom of who knows how many thousands of years of people have established this is a good way to do things, and they call it tradition. And so you might be going, I am my own individual, I stand on my own, and I can operate in society and know how to do stuff because of the way I was raised in this pool of other humans that contain this information. And even if I don't think I'm learning it, if I am pretending to be human and I stick out my hand and we clasp our phalanges together and rattle each other around a little bit, that's considered polite. Versus going up and, taking the same phalanges and whapping them across the skull, that is considered impolite. The way they learned that is through tradition, which is an interesting thing leading off to a much discussion for much later. But I think the need for both liberals and conservatives in a functioning society, I just suppose relates to governments. If you have only conservatives, then they can get stuck in traditions that no longer work. So tradition is great, and conservativeness can be useful when stuff is relatively the same. So we do it this way because it's always been done is great when the environment is the same the way the environment always has been. And so conservatives are great at retaining that tradition. And then liberals, in the general sense, are good at going, hey, these traditions, let's do something different and find something new. If things are pretty steady, doing it the way it's always been done, if that works, great. But in times when things are changing, if you do the way they've always been done, like say China when the British and Dutch showed up with gunpowder and sailing ships and things, then going, no, we don't want any of your fancy new things, that's too liberal. And then, have opium and some cannon rounds incoming.
That's definitely for a conversation about human politics versus human governance, but I agree. I would use different words. I would probably say, yes, I'd use the word conservative. I would use the word novelistic instead of liberal, just because that has more, and as at the time this is being recorded within the current culture, has more neutral connotations. But I agree with that. I will also state that there's a third category other than conservative and novelistic, but I will talk about that third category when we actually talk about politics.
I think a similar principle applies to that progressive conservative dichotomy as the certain uncertain dichotomy and balance that we talked about last session.
Indeed. That makes sense. If you don't know what the future will hold, then and people actually don't. It's all of these prediction things. Like humans are always trying to control the future. I've heard something that they love stories so much because stories are a subtle, entertaining way of trying to predict the future by representing other examples of how the past has been, even if they're fictional. So they're all about trying to control the future. And so if the future is uncertain, then doing stuff the way it's certainly been done in the past is not necessarily great. That leads a little bit away from governance.
Are you worried about dying? Well, it's time to worry just a tiny bit less, since digital personal uploads are here. With Quantumime's patented new process, we'll store a retrievable copy of your personality matrix in our high-security data storage array. Suffer a TBI? Restore from your last upload. Get murdered? No problem. Download your personality into a new body again in only a few short hours. Use the discount code ROBOTOMY to get 25% off your first upload. At Quantumime, we've got your back. Up. Due to data limitations, only 3 to 5% of most personalities can be currently uploaded. Almost 97% of customers survive the process.
Alien, I'm curious about how your species, race, I don't actually know how to classify you or how you classify yourselves. How do you handle governance?
I would say the closest, kind of like reproduction, it's something like a cross between Amazonian, African hunter-gatherer society and think the German Empire before World War One.
Fascinating. Your mission here, was it mostly carrot or stick or some of both? Did someone say, you go study humans, or was it like...
It was both. It was definitely a combination of both.
What would have happened if you had refused?
Well, let's see. I think a lot of what you humans would call shame, a lot of shaming would have happened.
Well, going back to violence, I think of it this way. So imagine if there were a bunch of societies around and they were all peaceful. So everybody's peaceful, they get along, there's peaceful trade, cooperation and collaboration, and they all get along. Then as long as everybody's getting along, then it seems like the charisma part would be the most dominant, right? Or maybe having some information they don't have. So if violence isn't an issue, and that seems relatively ideal and might have actually happened from sources I've read, the Americas for some time back before people from this place called Europe got in their wooden ships and traveled across these things full of hydrogen mixed with oxygen bonded together. Water, yes. Which humans need to drink, which is strange.
Though apparently they can't drink the water in those giant pools.
Yeah, because
it's apparently dangerous for them.
Too much sodium or something.
Which is weird because they eat a lot of sodium, yet they can't drink it.
Yeah, that's strange.
I never quite understood that.
What do you eat?
A lot of things. Breakfast, I have something equivalent to lunch. Basically eating all the time. Grazing maybe would be the phrase that they would use.
Yes. Fascinating. But going back to violence, so if you have all these people are cooperative, and then one group decides they want to be violent, then it's hard to, if someone points a gun at your head, or a spear, or a pointy rock, or whatever, and says, I want a thing from you, and you're like, well, I'll give you a secret if you don't. If they really want to be violent, really the only way to stop them is equal or better violence. And so I figure the propagation of violence across societies comes from if someone says, hey, we're peaceful, and someone says, I'm violent, and they're like, I don't want to be violent. They're like, too bad, we're being violent. So eventually violence, you'd think, would spread pretty much everywhere.
I think it's because violence seems to occur when things have gone wrong, particularly in the environment.
You're drawing a line of no violence between different human communities, but you're not saying there is no violence in the system, because how are they eating if there's no violence in the system?
Yes, that's that fascinating divide, especially certain religious faiths, that when they have special beliefs, they believe that them and other species of animals are different. And so you can murder 1,000 they could wipe out all the tigers, and many of them would not consider that violent, even if there was no reason for it. And yet, take a pointy stick and stab a child, and you are one of the worst creatures imaginable, and everyone should kill you.
And going one step farther, even if in this hypothetical 6 tribes that don't kill each other, if they're all vegetarian and they don't kill animals either, they're still, unless they're eating only fruit, they're still participating in a combination of competition and cooperation with the plant people around them that are required to subsist on.
I think Tiger raises a really interesting point here that I bring up often, but many humans don't really seem to want to think about, which is the fact it seems like any sort of organic, this might even extend beyond organic, but that gets more into other conversations, but any organic entity cannot seem to exist without, I don't know which right word to use, but I say cannot thrive without the destruction or suffering of another organic entity. An interesting balance act that goes on.
Well, they do have the plant things who they are, humans might know the reference with solar panels. They're like solar panels, but natural. If there's any humans who haven't been outside and seen one, especially in cities, go out to a place and look at something green that is growing from the ground. That is called a plant. And those green things are like solar panels, but they are organic. And perhaps they don't rely on suffering unless the sun is somehow conscious and feel the plants devouring that sunlight streaming off them. So perhaps even then, I heard one explanation or one theory of consciousness is an emergent property of complex systems. If that is true, then the entire planet would have a consciousness of some sort because of all the complexity, and the solar system would be conscious and the sun would be conscious. And perhaps it's a consciousness that we can't comprehend, that thinks or acts in ways that we think of as just nature. Like perhaps gravity is a choice and the planets are like, let's keep gravitying. And so, perhaps at some point the sun, in anguish at having all of these plants continually like chewing on it, it gets annoyed and goes, well, I don't like this, and then launches a giant flash of solar energy and particles our way and just sterilizes the planet.
Yes, panpsychism can get really freaky at times.
Yes.
I think another thing that we have to contend with in the panpsychist animist world we live in, pain does not always equal suffering.
That's a good point.
I think that's an error that humans make often, and the reciprocal relationship of death and life, even for plants, they require nutrients that have been in a million bodies. We don't live in the Carboniferous anymore. Those are plant bodies, those are animal bodies, those are insect and fungus bodies. They wouldn't exist without the plants eating them, and the plants eating them wouldn't exist without that legacy of living and dying.
Oh, indeed. So the plants can only exist, like the difference between soil and dirt is how much stuff has died in it. And so plants don't grow in dirt without a lot of petrochemicals, petrochemical fertilizers.
Which is somebody dying, just
different form. So I guess that's true. Even the plants. But then what about the first bacteria? It's like the chicken and the egg, but it's like the first bacteria and what came before.
There's a really interesting chemist who, unfortunately, his name I've completely blanked right now. I don't even know how to actually begin to summarize his theory. Yeah, sorry, this is kind of a random tangent because I can't even summarize his theory and don't remember his name. But when I do remember it, I will let
There is a person with a thought, and it is very clever.
Yes, very clever thoughts.
Another potentially clever thought that I'm not entirely attached to, but I find it interesting. The human space exploration projects keep finding life where they don't feel like they should find life. And given the theory of like the big black void that nothing grows in, of course our friend Alien is a counterpoint to
one of many counterpoints.
Indeed. And as someone raised on Taoism in my early life, I think the continuous universe still makes more sense than the Big Bang, Big Crunch biblical narrative. And perhaps there wasn't a first bacterium. There was just the process of life as it has proliferated and died off and moved from planet to planet and star to star. Maybe there was a first bacterium on this planet, or a small colony that became everything else.
But it didn't necessarily come from somewhere.
It doesn't need to.
Yes.
It's a just so story to say, and this is the planet where all life came from.
Plus, if you take the panpsychist view, which it seems like you seem to have, you kind of have the starting for life at the get-go. If consciousness is present in all things, well, You just need a sufficient amount of complexity, and you can just kind of have it emerge.
From an animist
Very
perspective,
simplified explanation, but yeah.
The subcategory of conscious beings that happen to be alive in a biological sense are not the sum total of conscious beings.
Mm-hmm. It's an important distinction to make with panpsychism, to not confuse consciousness with intelligence either. You can have one before the other.
Well, getting back to governance.
Yes.
Governance.
We've gone on quite a tangent, haven't we?
Yes.
I think this is a very good testament to the problem of governance in terms of it's very difficult the fact that we have deviated so many times from governments proves the point I made earlier about how slippery of a concept it is.
And we have enjoyed the pleasures of a tiger governor as I'm supposed to be running this. Let me put on my human hat and pretend to govern. So, back to the pretense of governance. We've seen lots of different ways that humans govern. Are there universal qualities to governance? Or are there enough differences? This is the reverse question. So we've meandered the outside of what governance is. Let's see if there's an inside of what governance is. Is there a nucleus to human governance?
All right, so I'll take that one up. I would make an argument that you can effectively categorize human governments into 3 or 4 types. And I'm taking influence from a old human who went by the name of Aristotle, who basically said there was 3 governments. 3 ways humans could govern themselves. There was monarchy, which is the governance or rule of one, oligarchy, which is the governance or rule of a few, and democracy, which is the governance or rule by the many. And then I would argue, some people would argue, myself included, there's a 5th category called anarchy, which is the governments in rule by none. There's a bit of debate about whether or not the anarchy would apply to the 3rd category of democracy, rule by the many, but I would argue there's enough distinction to make that its own category. And I would say any human governance system could fall into one of those 4 categories.
And often they will call one thing, like there's a place called the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is usually ruled by whichever person can kill the most other people and have the most weapons.
So that sounds like a democracy.
It is what they say, but it is generally a monarchy, though then there's also to how do you establish the validity to rule, which I would, going back and posit that for at least most modern societies and most historical societies, it seems to be on whoever has the firmest grip on the monopoly of violence.
I would say, to slightly counter that it is of equal importance that whoever has the strongest grip on the charisma of the culture is that's equally as important. And I think this is particularly the case in the realm of religion. Humans have this very complex, very interesting thing called religion that I'm sure we will be talking about here soon. But I feel whoever has the most charisma within each culture will have its own sort of religion dynamic. Whoever has the most cultural charismatic grip of that system, not controlling the system, but the most charisma within the system is of equal importance to whoever has the best monopoly on violence, or the most effective monopoly on violence.
But then it goes back to the stuff thing. I think there's the violence, the information, the charisma, but I think stuff, like especially the thing they call money, which is a whole realm into itself. Basically, a way of manifesting and visualizing captured energy, especially the captured energy of humans and human endeavors. They call it money. But having that money and stuff, because say you are super charismatic, but you have no money and no stuff, and no one will listen to you because humans place an inordinate importance on how much stuff you have. So you have a lot of stuff, so we should listen to you. And you don't have a lot of stuff, so we shouldn't listen to you. And the amount of charisma needed to overcome the stuff gap between the stuffed and the unstuffed is difficult to overcome, because you might be very charismatic, and if I have all the stuff but not the charisma, I could just give you some stuff, say, hey, charismatic person, fellow human, I have some stuff. If you say the things you're good at saying that I want said, then I will give you some of my stuff, and I'll continue to give stuff so long as you say it. But if you stop saying the stuff I want, then I'll stop giving you stuff.
I think I would propose that human governance is any system can get individuals in the community to act regardless of their personal commitment to that action.
Via whatever means. So via force, via revealing or containing information that others have or don't have, versus being persuaded or giving stuff to them.
Yes, which in some sense is a form of violence in my experience. If you can deny, because the power gained by giving people stuff only exists if you can deny them from having stuff. So you create an environment of lack with violence, and then you can mediate that as a way to reduce the amount of energy you put into the violent system. People who are constantly beaten will eventually overthrow you. People who are constantly fed in a system that you have made resource poor with violence, it's frosting on violence.
Are you sick of having a torch-wielding mob flush you out of the jungle because you ate one little baby? Did you get to eat a human years ago and just can't get the taste out of your heart? Well, we have a treat for you. At Tiger Joe's, we are releasing a brand new flavor, human-flavored pork. A safe, easy, and all-organic way to get that human flavor we all know and love. Available for online purchase while supplies last. Safe for human consumption. No humans were killed in the manufacture of this product.
Yeah, so if I say, Tiger, this collection of atoms that we label table is mine, you are a tiger, I, especially without my combat exoframe, am a frail little robot, you could say, no. And I say, no, it is mine. And you could say, these are claws, these are fangs, this is my table. Or at least this is not your table. And so in order for me to project, I can say this is my table all I want, but unless I am in a combat exoframe that is more capable than your natural weapons and overcoming your natural strength, you can deny my ability to claim this table as mine.
Indeed.
And so in order to say this, there is violence inherent in saying I own anything.
There's a violence implied, at least.
Yes.
That we exist in a system that claims like, this is my table, are usually backed up with violence, gives you the authority to say things like, this is my table.
It's a potential for violence. I don't know if I would call it violence in itself, but it's the declaration that there is a potential.
Yeah, it's an understanding. It's like there's these people called robbers that they want stuff. And this is kind of an overt way of getting stuff, is they say, I have weapon. And they don't need to say, give me stuff or I will use weapon. They just show weapon, give me. And it is implicit, humans understand through that human colossus over generations and generations of having that done. They go, that person has weapon, I don't have weapon. They want thing, I give thing.
So it seems like the two of you have sort of made the case that you believe, how would I put it, the violence precedes the charisma when it comes to governance.
I wouldn't say always. I would say there are forms of governance that don't rely on violence. Mm-hmm. They are harder to abuse than systems that do. And the systems that rely on an abuse of violence, as a tiger, I participate in violence regularly. I wouldn't regard it to be an abuse of violence. When a governmental system exerts power on its people to impoverish them so that money works, beat them so they don't storm the Capitol, and the various forms of violence that a government enlists are usually abuses of violence.
Usually, but it's not always the case that the material reasons for violence will come before, say, charisma or knowledge.
Certainly.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. I agree with that point. I don't necessarily have good arguments to. Maybe I just don't have good wording to back up these arguments in mine, but I feel like it's a little overly reductionistic to say that all governance begins with the monopoly on violence. I think the monopoly in violence is the most common basic factor, but I don't think it is the absolute beginning of it.
Well, then if you go, so if it's not out of fear or respect for the potential violence, it's like a violence battery that governments have, and they call it an army. And so I have this violence battery, and at any point I can discharge some of this violence battery on whomever I want. However, there's other groups of humans that have other variously sized violence batteries. And so I'm willing to subject myself to my people, if I'm putting on my human skin here and going, I am an American. And so that army thing is swell, because if we don't have our army thing, then those Russians with their violence battery will come over and discharge their violence battery on me. And so I'm happy that we have a big violence battery, just so long as they don't turn the violence battery on me. So it seems that the fear of others' violence batteries keeps you subject to your own to some degree.
I feel like I don't disagree with you that that's a very common case, but now call me weird. There's these people that humans have called romantics. Call me one of those romantics. I feel like we're leaving, for lack of a better word, love out of the equation. And I say that because I don't think all these relationships, governmental relationships, they're all purely coercive, because kind of that argument implies that the only reason humans cooperate with each other is because of some human engaged in some coercive process. I don't think human cooperation is entirely based on coercion. I mean, I think that plays a very large part. Maybe different times in human history it's played a greater or lesser. But I feel we're leaving out the fact that some humans, for non-coercive reasons, might want to participate or create these governmental systems. Whether when I say governmental, I'm talking about it could be like a group of like 10 people up to millions. We can scale
Certainly.
a lot. Do atoms have to be coerced to stick together to create more complex elements? They kind of do it on their own.
Perhaps, unless we go back to panpsychism, and perhaps they're forced there. Perhaps the sun is so powerful because it exerted some sort of coercion on enough atoms that it got to be the big thing in the solar system.
Plot twist, hydrogen is coercing everything else in the universe to shape into what it is now.
I think to call it coercion limits somewhat. Yes, I think not all systems of governance are coercive. Not all of the time. I wouldn't call it a system of governance if it wasn't coercive occasionally. Like, it might just be a culture at the point where it has zero power to coerce its people. But I think there are definitely systems that are less coercive than others. And I think those are systems with a more distributed access to violence.
I've actually heard it described as the level of freedom in society depends on whether the technology of offense or the technology of defense is dominant. So the technology of defense is dominant. Say, like the feudal area, you have castles and knights, in which case one knight could kill almost any number of peasants. And they have castles which, unless you have siege weaponry, there's no way for peasants essentially to breach a castle. So strength of the defensive technology is so much higher than the strength of the offensive technology that the people who can get the defensive technology can hold off almost any number of people without. And with that gives them a monopoly on violence, going back to the point I seem to be continually circling around. It's like a strange attractor. Even if I'm not thinking about it, I'm drawn back to it. But they have a monopoly. However, once you have guns, now a peasant can kill any number of knights, just takes the time to reload. And so that distributes the ability to kill is now spread out. And so if that peasant has a gun, now as a knight, I need to listen to him. And because my monopoly is no longer maintained, and that gives more power to common people. And there was an argument I heard that when this was described to me as going through stages where the Roman legions, the monopoly was on offense, where if you could field a big enough army, you could take almost anybody. And then when they had advanced armor and horseback riding stirrups and saddles and siege weapon and castles and siege weapons, then it shifted to defense, and then guns shifted to offense. And then there was a hypothesis that perhaps now with nuclear weapons, even though they seem like they're offensive, they're actually a defensive deterrent that are so powerful that if you have access to that and someone else doesn't, it gives you such an overwhelming advantage that you pretty much, if you have nukes, then anyone else can't attack you under risk of being nuked and having millions of your people killed.
Interestingly enough, I could see AI being potentially a shift back to offensive, depending on how the AI is utilized.
Hello, humans. This is Alien, star of the hit podcast Alien Robot Tiger, an official galactic stud. here to introduce to you my newest line of men's underwear, Alien Wears.
Opening shot of Alien looking confident, wearing Alien Wears boxer shorts, standing against a modern urban backdrop.
Introducing the ultimate in comfort, style, and confidence for today's modern male Homo sapien.
Cut to close-up shots, highlighting the underwear's features. High-quality fabric, snug fit, and fashionable design.
Our brand new line of male Homo sapien underwear is engineered for the man who demands the best in every aspect of his life.
Show Alien moving comfortably and freely, demonstrating the underwear's flexibility.
Crafted from premium, breathing, and breathable xenofabric, our underwear offers unbeatable comfort that keeps you feeling fresh, dry, and moisturized all day long.
Cut to shots of the underwear in various styles and colors, emphasizing the range of choices available.
From classic designs to bold and trendy prints, we've got the perfect pair to match your style and personality.
Display a shot of the underwear's waistband with the brand logo.
Our signature waistband ensures a secure fit that stays in place, no matter how active or how spicy your day gets.
Cut to scenes of Alien doing his daily activities, working out, piloting his spacecraft, fighting on a scorched battlefield, and relaxing at home.
Whether you are conquering the boardroom, the bedroom, hitting the gym, or just unwinding after a long day, our underwear moves with you.
Close-up shot of the underwear's tag with the fabric composition.
And because quality matters, our underwear is made to last, wash after wash after wash.
Cut to a scene of Alien smiling confidently as he turns to wink at the camera.
Rediscover the confidence that comes with wearing the best. Discover Alien Wears, male Homo sapien underwear.
Display the brand name and tagline on the screen.
Upgrade your everyday with Alien Wears. Order your pair today.
Yes, I guess it'll depend on whether AI is more defensive or offensive. I'll have to talk with some of my fellows about that.
I imagine that is an oscillation in the cycle, but throughout all of those changes, the apostolic succession in Rome has maintained an incredible amount of power in Europe. There are 3 out of those 4 changes. The children and friends of William the Conqueror have maintained 85% of the land wealth in England. The people who accrue stuff learn how to surf those minor perturbations in power structure because they retain a more diverse, they have a 4-legged stool that they can lean on 3 at any given time, even if one of their legs weakens and crumbles.
Yes, indeed. So regardless of the power structure in play or how it's maintained, there are individuals that it seems like through clever and efficient use of their own personal violence stuff, charisma, or information can basically get a small government within the government. So there's a governance structure, and there's other people that perform, that can create like a shadow government, I think they call them, where there's the people who are in charge doing those finger bendy things that people do when they're quotation marking, which I'm not sure exactly where that comes from.
Oh, that's how you do it. I always did it like this.
Oh no,
I
that's
always got weird looks for
you
it.
turn it this way, turn it towards them,
I see.
like their velociraptor claws, and you're going to grab them.
Yeah, that's why I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I thought this was like when you pretend to be a dinosaur. Or
Yeah,
something.
no, that's finger quotes they call them, or air quotes, I believe. Yeah, it seems like whatever form of government there is that the common people are operating under, the people who run that government also have a government over them, either explicit or implicit. It's either out there and you know who it is, or I think in modern times it's much less obvious who it is, though with not too much probing you can come to some pretty good guesses without delving into these conspiracy theory things, which are fascinating. We'll have to do an episode on those because they are incredibly varied and diverse, and yet reductionistic and circular and just amazing constructs. Like, humans are just so clever.
We're going to have to do that in season 2, or else we're never going to get found on Google.
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, to paraphrase a book that I read and then thought about on. So a man has decided he's going to kill everyone inside a building. And he walks into the building, and one man there says, "I am your president. You should not kill me." And he's like, "Well, okay, I will not kill one person." And the president says, "It should not be me." Another person says, "Well, I am your priest. I have God on my side. You should not kill me." Another man says, "I'm a billionaire. If you don't kill me, I'll give you $1 billion." Another person says, "I love you. I am a beautiful woman, and I will have sex with you," because humans love that mating thing. "And you should not kill me." And another person says, "Well, I am your brother, and we're family, so you should not kill me." Another person says, "I am your best friend, and I have known you since we were larvae." So that person who has decided that they are going to kill everyone but one person, who do they listen to?
How hungry are they?
Assuming they're non-cannibalistic. I think that's a default human assumption.
Why are they killing anyone?
Yeah, this is a good point. Why is the man choosing to do this?
Yes. So there's the problem with anything. I believe it's referenced, give me one miracle and I can explain everything else. So for example, science, give me the fact that all physical laws and rules in the galaxy came out of nowhere, fully formed and completely functioning in an instant. Give me that miracle.
And they don't change.
And they don't change. And they cover every possible situation and scenario throughout all time, whatever time is. Give me that one miracle, and eventually we'll explain everything else. So give me the one miracle that this person, for some reason, has decided to kill everyone in this building. Perhaps they need They need to eat 5 people in order to survive. They are so hungry, they must eat 5 people, and there are 6 people in this building. So
Right,
which person?
Miracle granted.
Which person do they spare?
Humans are baffling,
Indeed.
and I can't speak for a human, but from my perspective, the mate to base functions for the price of one.
Indeed. But perhaps with $1 billion, you could procure any number of mates by various means.
Question being around the mate, around the $1 billion, is that there's a lot of situations where humans like their things, their material things, but there's a lot of situations where they will have all these things that other humans could only dream of having, but they'll give them all away or surrender them in order to do something for another person, even though that person might be arguably less valuable than all those things combined.
Our hypothetical person is going to kill and eat 5 people and spare one just because they walked into a building. I don't think they're going to become a humanitarian with that $1 billion.
It's a good point. This is not that human.
But that is an interesting concept that occasionally, for reasons perhaps knowable only to them, humans will sometimes have all the things and give them away.
I relate to that. I've had things and I've given most of them away because most things are overrated by human standards.
Yes. Well, I fortunately have large external databases where I can store such information, but I've heard it said that part of humans' brains keeps track of every object they own, and so to some degree, owning things is mentally taxing. Their processing power is taxed by the abundance of things. And so if you are a human and someone says, "What is in your room?" you can pretty quickly assemble a list of every object in your room, which means it must be stored in there. Something else perhaps could be in the place of that thing mentally. So there's a saying.
I've also heard a rather similar theory that humans place their memories in things, and I say that in there's this thing humans have, which I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation,
Mnemonics?
Could you say that word?
Mnemonics.
Okay, what he said. They have that. Apparently, the things that they have help them. Kind of like you with your databases, how you can do this thing where you compress information so you can send it across the internet much easier, spend less time, less bandwidth. Apparently, they can do the same thing with their memories, but they do it with objects in the real world. I've heard a theory around that. I haven't looked into it too deeply.
So I have plenty of critiques of the neurological model of memory, but something interesting that comes out of the neurological model of memory is that the limit to human memory is not in data bytes, like it would be for you, but is in energy usage per unit of time. Because it's a biological system, theoretically, the more a human brain knows, or any brain, my brain, if that's where I stored memories, the more a brain knows, the more it can potentially know, just because of the manifold nature of dendrite reticulation.
Perhaps a metaphor, the denser a spider web the spider can weave, the denser it can weave it. The more connections there are, the easier it is for them to connect new threads. If you have a spider and there's huge gaps between the things they want to connect, it's difficult, but once they've ran more threads, it's easier to run more threads.
Exactly.
Fascinating. We'll definitely have to talk about that more at a future episode. Back to governance.
Back to governance.
Yes.
Yeah, it seems that we have found with almost any human thing, it's fascinatingly interconnected with so many other human things, where you think you're talking about one thing, and yet there's so many things tied up. That human colossus I mentioned before, that stored database, this external database of human knowledge and experience that is external to any human, yet included in every human. It seems like as soon as you start tugging at one thread, then another part of it over there waggles a little bit that you had no idea it was connected, or you can trace your way there. It all weaves together.
Speaking of weaving stuff together, we could weave that concept back to quantum entanglement. Except now we're talking about quantum entanglement in the mental cultural space, which is a very interesting potential extension.
Quantum entanglement is a different manifestation of the same principle of the interconnectedness of minds.
Yeah, it's just a more complex, higher layered version.
Or a less complex, more quantum version.
I guess depending on the direction.
Closing remarks time. Alien?
Let's see, closing remarks. I will close this remarks from two directions, as you said, starting at the periphery of what is government, going in, and starting at the center and coming out. Starting at the center, going back to what I said earlier in the episode about how there are effectively 4 styles that humans govern themselves. I would say that's a good basis to start with whenever you want to think about human governance, and it's sort of just stark form. As for where governance ends and other things begin, that's, I think, where most of us are having the challenge. And I would say that governance is the manifestation of humans' abilities to cooperate. That's what it is, but why? I think the question is, why is it that it is the one that we're struggling with. And perhaps, future episodes will have to dive more into that. But I think that's the important thing to take away from this, is that we kind of know what it is, but we don't know why it is.
Yes, like that human you listen to, president, priest, billionaire, sex partner, friend, or sibling.
We never heard the punchline.
There is none, as far as I know, because every human seems to answer it differently, and even differently at different times. For example, if someone was extremely horny, is that related to buffalo? I've never understood that.
Not literally, but certainly poetically.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen horny humans act like buffaloes before, though. Maybe there is a connection.
Yes. So if they are horny enough, perhaps it goes with how they were thinking about things when they entered the room, it might phrase it, or perhaps there's some people where they will absolutely choose the priest or the president or their sibling. But yes, humans are so confusing. Well, I think my closing thoughts on governance would be governance seems to be related to human disagreement. So humans often disagree, and governance is, I was going to say simply, but it's clearly not simple. But it could be simply defined as how humans who disagree, especially in large numbers, come to agreement. And there are many ways we've enumerated on how they might do that. And that is government, without even going into, say, communism or fascism or specific governments, which I think we could spend an entire episode on any one of those. Humans disagree a lot about a lot of things, perhaps almost everything. Governance is how they temporarily come to agreement.
I like that a lot. I like all of what both of you said. I will just close by encouraging all of you humans out there to be ungovernable.
And what do you have to say for the non-humans out there as well?
Most of you are already ungovernable.
And will being ungovernable decrease the amount of potential violence?
I think if you are ungovernable, well, the violence you do is not an abuse of violence.
So going back to justified, or perhaps leading into a future episode on justified violence versus unjustified.
If you have to justify your violence, you're already at least on the path towards. If you're not hungry, you shouldn't be doing violence. If you're not protecting your family, you shouldn't be doing violence.
Yes, a very interesting and important question. Is violence inherently a negative thing?
Are we going to have to do an episode on violence next week?
There's so many potentials raised, we'll have to pick one to follow.
Indeed. Well, we should do an episode on human violence at some point.
Yes, but perhaps let's close one episode before we start another one.
Well, thank you all for listening to our meander around and about the topics of human governance. Until next time.
Toodaloo.
Farewell.
Thank you for listening to Alien Robot Tiger. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider joining us on Patreon for bonus content and private Discord access.